Welcome to episode 85 of the Forward from 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 who are pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories, their way, and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward from 50, and your host for today's show. Today I'm speaking with a man from Colorado who spent a good part of his life in ministry. What many people do not realize is that ministers can experience the same problems the rest of us do. Right out of college, Robert Ruesch was involved with the YMCA of the Rockies. Later, he moved to California where he managed properties and became a medic working on an ambulance service. A few years later, and after turning 50, he moved back to Colorado to become a journalist and start writing books. Later, Robert started Christian Resort Ministries to help place chaplains in big RV resorts in states popular with RV owners. As a young man, Robert got married and had a daughter, Jennifer, before the marriage relationship ended in divorce. His daughter lived with her mother, who eventually remarried. When Jenny was 14 years old, her stepfather started sexually abusing her. Jennifer began masking that pain and her feelings of shame with alcohol and drugs, which turned into a full-blown addiction for which she could not overcome. For 30 years, Jenny experienced multiple failed relationships and other major crises, including spending 3 years in a federal prison. 2 years ago, she overdosed and stopped breathing in the emergency room. Jenny was revived and finally admitted she wanted to get out of her life of addiction. During that next session of rehab, Jenny started a journal. When Robert picked her up from the center to take her back home, she let him read her journal. In it, she described her lifetime struggle with physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual abuse. It was a horrible experience for Robert, too, because there were times he had no idea where his daughter was or if she was even alive. After Robert read Jenny's journal, he felt God telling him to share that story with the world. Jennifer agreed, and they wrote a book together titled The Long Road Home, A Family's Journey Through Addiction. To tell us more about the book and how it can help other families going through similar experiences, please welcome author and pastor Robert Ruesch to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Robert. I really appreciate it. You have released a new book, The Long Road Home, A Family's Journey Through Addiction. Was this your first book that you wrote?
No, this is actually my fourth book that I have written. I've written two books about Estes Park Center YMCA. One is called In the Warmth of the Shadow, and that's about my boyhood youth up there, from 1950 through 1967, and the adventures that I did. And then the other book is When We Were Pioneers, which was about Snow Mountain Ranch, YMCA, and that's taking basically a virgin forest homestead from the Just Homestead and creating a Christian family camp. And then the third book was The Elf Not on the Shelf, which is Gilbert jumps off the shelf to find the meaning of life and joy through the Advent season.
Oh, that's good. Good timing for that book.
I think so, yeah.
Super. We'll have to link to that in the show notes. But this book is different because you worked on it with your daughter. Tell us how this
That's
came
correct,
about.
yes. My daughter was 14 years old when she was abused by her stepdad. And at that point, she became an alcoholic. And so for the next 30 plus years, anything that she could sniff or drink or swallow, whatever, she tended to do. She had a very low self-esteem, went through multiple relationships, major crises throughout her life, until 2 years ago in March, she was with her, what I call -1, because good relationships are +1, but he was a -1, narcissistic, rather nefarious person. She overdosed. He got her to the emergency room, and in the waiting room of the emergency room, she quit breathing and basically died. The one good thing -1 did was that he screamed, hollered, and got attention, and after 4 doses of Narcan, she came back to life. From that, we put her into rehab, which she'd already agreed to go, and then after rehab, she came and moved in with us for several months. But Greg, I can tell you that the trip back from Texas to Colorado, it was an open book for her. And I heard God say to me, you need to write this in a book. And I heard myself say to God, you've got to be kidding. There's absolutely no way. And he says, how long can you tread water? Because obviously Noah would have 40 days of treading water. So I said, okay, I'll look at it. And it just took a while to get into it. And finally, after some other rather difficult circumstances to the point where she was being physically abused besides mentally and spiritually and emotionally abused, she called and said, I want out. And so my youngest son and I, Chad, drove down to San Antonio, picked her up, and brought her home. And at that time, she presented me her life journal. And I read that.
She'd been writing about this experience for a long time?
She had been writing about this when she was in rehab.
Wow.
It's part of her assignment. So she went through this whole thing, and I read it. Let me step back a little bit. During her life, she ended up making some really rather not smart decisions. And one of them was to travel with two friends from Texas to New Mexico for them to buy drugs and to come back. And the U.S. Marshal stopped them, and that got her 3 years in federal prison. And that's another life experience that she went through. During that time, they did a psych evaluation of her in the federal government, and it's 27 pages long, which I also have a copy of and she gave me. So between her life journal that she wrote and this 27 pages, I had quite a bit of material. The fact that she was living with us, I could say, Jenny, what about this and what about that? And she was an open book. She just said, here's my life. This is what it is. Being a Christ follower and accepted Christ early in her life, God kept her alive. I kept telling her during her addictive years, look, God's going to prune you down to the point that your nickname is going to go from Boot to Stubby, and that's going to be it. But she is living with us now, has held a job for over a year. And when she moved in, she was 49 going on 16. She's 50 going on between 20 and 25. So we're making progress.
Okay. Very good. It's a tough story to read, especially to hear you talking about it. And I know when you started your book, you start with a timeline that just extends for years that shows this horrible path that Jennifer was on. And that started when she was 14 years old, you said, when she was sexually abused by her stepfather, I believe.
Correct. Yeah. And I had full custody of her, but being adopted, when she said, I really want to know my mom, because her mom left when she was 5 years old, 5 or 6, I can't remember. And she really didn't know her mom. I thought, agree with that, because I wanted to know my biological mom. And through God's intervention, I was able to do that. And that's another story. But I thought, yeah, I'm sensitive to this. But abused people keep things quiet. And the fact that she was now an alcoholic, her stepdad would parade around house in the buff and said, this is my secret. And so I know your secret. So this is how things are going to operate.
What people don't realize is when you start numbing the hurt and more hurt comes your way, then you get caught in this vicious cycle, and it is extraordinarily hard to break an addiction for a lot of people.
It's like that old Mickey Mouse cartoon. You'd see him in the rowboat trying to get out of the whirlpool, and he'd just about get to the top, and he would be so tired, and it would suck him back down again. Mm-hmm. That's what an alcoholic and an addict goes through. And their line is, I can quit at any time. But the only way they can quit at any time is if they die.
That's unfortunate, yes. And a lot of times the addicts are surrounded by enablers, if I'm not mistaken, so that even if they wanted to try and climb out, it's like putting two crabs in a bucket. As soon as one person gets to leave, the other one reaches up and pulls them back down.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the line from the movie Godfather, when he says that they've got you, and when you try to pull away, they suck you back down and in. Mm-hmm. And because Satan is so nefariously evil, he uses whatever weak point a person has to keep them addicted. And of course, being with alcohol and drugs, the more you take, the more you need. The more you need, the more you take. And so that gets back to the little Mickey Mouse cartoon in the whirlpool. You can't pull yourself out. You have to have somebody reach down and do that.
So is the long road home your story or Jennifer's, or is it yours combined?
It's combined. We wrote this in the first person. I use we because it's with her, and it's from her first person and my first person. And it's what she went through and then what I went through and combining them together. Some chapters are all hers and some are both of ours.
Okay. It's each chapter starts with scripture and ends with a quote. And I like that because it sandwiches the story between hope and truth.
Thank you. Yeah. It's that's my style of writing. My first two books, all chapters started with scripture. And on my third book, of course, being at Advent, there was scripture for every day. So just something that I want to do to honor God. It's his writing and we should be guided by it.
What was the most difficult thing for you to do when she was going through all of this?
Wondering if she was alive.
Because you had no contact?
I would have contact and then no contact. I would call and get a voice recording. I would call and get a voice recording. And my wife can tell you that I would just get emotionally ballistic over it, wondering if I was going to get a call from any of the first responders saying, we found your daughter in the ditch and you need to sit down.
Were you?
Or being afraid that there would be a knock on the door and there'd be two police officers there.
Explaining that she had finally died. Yes. So were you offended when she wasn't calling you back, or were you more concerned?
I was more concerned. I'm not offended. I believed that God was protecting her. That was my nightly prayer, is for her protection and safety. And I was just more concerned what was going on, what was she taking, who was she with, what were they doing, what was happening.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever find out why she wouldn't return your calls?
She was just doing things. She was out, and sometimes she was out because she had passed out. And then she didn't answer her phone and didn't realize that I'd called.
Now, you obviously are a Christian because you've been involved in a lot of Christian ministries. Was Jennifer going through all of this?
Yes, she accepted Christ when she was in 8th grade, but she was what I call in the book a Christian light. She went through the Christian buffet, but never the complete meal.
Okay.
I had the honor to baptize her down in Florida. And I think that was her reaching out to see if that would help. And of course, we know baptism is good, but yet until you walk the walk, it's only a symbol to you. And so I knew she was a Christian. I knew God would protect her. I knew if she died, that she would be in heaven. We would see each other there. And that was my solace. That's what I had to keep in the forefront of my heart. Although my human emotions were like, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on?
Right.
And I can't tell you how many times she called and over time and said, come rescue me. And then would slip back into addiction again.
And a lot of people say they put all of the blame on the addict for not being able to pull themselves out on their own strength. They don't have the strength. They're too weak to do that. And that's how addiction works and how Satan works, is he keeps pushing that back to you, keep devaluing you and explaining how weak you are and that you'll never be able to do this on your own, and keep you as far away from God as Satan possibly can. And it works to keep people trapped in a lifestyle they don't want.
Exactly. And Jennifer was in that. And with some of her associative relationships and friends, they were just part of that. And they didn't, like she said once, one of her friends said, have you ever tried heroin, shooting up? She goes, no. He says, well, you'd love it. Okay.
Wow. So the people that are around an addict want to keep them addicted as well, because for them to pull away really makes them look bad or feel bad themselves. There's
a line in Proverbs 25, verse 23, 24, I think it is, somewhere in there, that says, basically, the company you keep is the person you are. And you have to be aware of that. If you surround yourself with addicts, you will be an addict.
Mm-hmm.
If you surround yourself with intellectual people, you will be more intellectual. So it's how you protect yourself by your choices that you make. Jennifer will tell you that consequences have created actions, or actions have created consequences for her that have been extremely terrible for her. Losing jobs, stealing, getting drugs. This last overdose that she got, she knew immediately as soon as she took it that it was not right. And they found out later that it was meth and fentanyl combined together. That's an upper and a downer. And your body's not an elevator. And that put her into a very serious medical condition. I flew in the night after. I got the phone call at 2 a.m. says she's not breathing. I don't know if she's going to live. And minus one working for an airlines was able to get me a standby ticket. And the gate attendant was able to get me on. The plane was full, but I got the last seat.
That's also like God working a miracle for you.
Well, it was God working. And let me tell you another thing that how God worked. She was in Teen Challenge. We had to ask her to leave at one point in our life. And because she was just not doing what she should be doing. And she is a sweet child. Let me put that in there. And of course, that's not just me speaking, but it's other people that say she really has potential and is very sweet and very kind and loving. And she will give you her jacket in the middle of a blizzard and walk around in a short sleeve shirt. She's just that type of person. But we had to ask her to leave and took her down to Teen Challenge. And that's in the book about the story of driving from Colorado to Florida to see her son, all the way back to Texas to put her in Teen Challenge. The women's director in Teen Challenge, she and her became very good friends. At one point, Jenny then got arrested, obviously, and put in jail. When she went to her first federal prison, her roommate had been the roommate of the women's director in prison.
Wow.
When she was transferred to California for over a month of evaluation, when she came back, she got the same roommate. When she was transferred finally to her federal facility, her buggy or roomie at that time was the alpha person of the floor and said, "Don't mess with Jenny." For 3 years, she was protected from any type of violence. She never got into a fight. She never got reprimanded. She never, except for original being in solitary because of trying to commit suicide, she never had any danger to her. Now that's God working.
Absolutely. Did you have to overcome or deal with any guilt over Jennifer's situation and how she grew up?
Yeah, I did. It gets back to her wanting to know her mom. I should have said, just go visit.
Rather than go live with her?
Go live, yeah, because we did 7th grade for me, 8th grade for her, 9th grade for me, and then 10th, 11th, and 12th. That's when things went downhill for her.
It's hard to gain stability in your life when you're moving around that much, especially from one state to another.
And you have to understand that her stepfather and her mom were both police officers, and he was a detective in charge of the juveniles. So once he got caught, he was charged with 3 different offenses with the potential of being charged with 21.
Wow.
And we went to Jennifer's sentencing at court and, of course, got a chance to talk to the judge and everything. And he only got 90 days in the state prison.
Her father did for all the...
Her stepfather.
Stepfather, for all the abuse that he had started.
Exactly.
That is sad.
Very sad, but she did get to see him handcuffed in front of her,
Okay.
which helped. But then after court was over, Barbara, my wife, and I said, let's go out and kind of have a debriefing, etc. And she said, no, I'm in my car. I'm gone. Goodbye. And she left. Now, you have to understand that her mom at the time had been on the police department and was one of the first female officers for Thornton. She was actually the first female officer for Thornton to make it as a female. But she had gone on and got her law degree, was working for a law firm that defended police officers. With that, and became a deckhand on a dive boat during this whole time. I told her mom, and I've forgiven her mom, and I said, Jenny needed 2 things during this process. She needed a mom and she needed a lawyer, and you were the package deal, and she got neither.
Ooh. So mom is dealing with some guilt issues as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that before church every Sunday, the two of them now have conversations and they talk and they communicate. It's just not, I've done this and I've done that. It's not the perils of Pauline for Jennifer. And for her mom would say, I guess that's okay if that's what makes you happy. She had this verbal and emotional defense up. So not that her mom didn't want to be there to help, but being there to help and being there for support are two different things.
Do you have any advice for parents who have to deal with prodigal child?
Do not stop. Never quit. Continue on. If you stop, you have lost their life. How far would you go to save a person's life? I watched a movie last night where the mom was telling the daughter, I would tear off my right arm to feed you if I had to. Tear off your right arm. Do what you need to do.
Now, how would that differ from the tough love that you had to exhibit by asking her to leave the house?
That's a good question. At some point, you have to just give it over to God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we had to do. Barbara was able to find Teen Challenge down in Texas for her. And I'll tell you what, Teen Challenge is probably is the greatest program. The recidivity rate is so low for them coming back. They are so successful. And they work with the kids, find something. And Jenny did not want to go there. And she called our bluff and said, I want to see my son before I go. And he's in Florida. He probably won't take the motorhome down to Florida. Get in the motorhome. And we learned our lesson the first night out because we stopped in a big box parking lot. And she got out and got connected. And then from then on, we stopped on the side of a road after dark on a lonely road where she had no way to connect with anybody whatsoever.
Okay.
And she slept most of the way there and back, and that was her defense. But I'll tell you what, hearing the door close to Teen Challenge after saying goodbye to her was tough. But I knew she was in the right place, even though she didn't think she was.
Is Teen Challenge open to people of all ages, or is there a maximum age?
That's the funny thing. They're open to all ages. Jenny thought she's going to be around just a bunch of teenage brats, and there were people that were older than her there.
Wow.
And for the director of Teen Challenge, the women's director, she's moved on, but she and the director still connect and talk on Facebook, etc. Matter of fact, the director helps support this book, which I just find amazing.
That's such a cool story to know that they've got that kind of support, because people need to hear these kind of stories in order to have hope that they can overcome their own problem.
Yes, they do, because God is in control. We ain't nervous. We probably will be, but we shouldn't be. Jenny was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis back in the late 1900s. And that was a big hit for her because they had to get that under control. So that was very difficult for her. Her husband at the time really didn't support her on that. Said, yeah, it's just your mind. And of course, being an addict, the medical field knew that at the time. So they're not gonna go all in because they know that she's not all in.
That's a good point, because they want to see people demonstrating some kind of commitment in order to get the help that they need, which is another vicious circle, because without the help, they can't get out. And if they can't get out, they can't get the help. And it's just...
Yeah, it becomes the miry pit that the only way to be lifted out of that pit is to reach up and see that God is reaching down and to grab his hand. And the thing is that he will have a hold of you, but you could release your hand and you're back in because he's going to allow you to make that choice.
What did you do before you started to write books?
I've had a career. I've always loved writing. I was with the YMCA, the Rockies, which is the largest YMCA. That's where I was raised. And that's not, Greg, that's not a place where a whole bunch of overweight guys are running around in Speedos looking for the swimming pool. YMCA, the Rockies has 11 very high-end lodges, 380 cabins on one campus. They have their own zip code. They've been there since 1907. Presidents, Mother Teresa, etc. People have come there for conferences and stayed there. It's got a legacy of incredible stuff. And that's where I was raised and worked, volunteered. went through college there. After I left from college, I ended up going back there in 1971, working as a professional at Snow Mountain Ranch for 11 years, and then moved out to California and did property management. And I was also in charge of an ambulance service out there as a medic. And here's an interesting sidebar story. In 1987, I had volunteered myself as a bachelor to be auctioned off for the Jerry Lewis telethon. And I thought, this is stupid. This is just absolutely stupid. And in the middle of the night, I just said, Lord, this is not me. I want to be married, but only to a Christian woman. And if I can't be married to a Christian woman, then you need to give me some really strong strength, because I am not going to make this without you. And I said, and if you decided I'm not going to be married to a Christian woman, you have changed your mind at least twice that I know of. So maybe a third time would be wonderful and be me. And I went to sleep immediately. That was on a Monday. On Friday, my wife, Barbara, wrote me, now you got to step back to 1964, that we were high school sweethearts and dated our sophomore and senior year. We had not had any contact for 25 years. And I got that letter on Friday. And the phone company thought it was just wonderful, the phone calls back and forth. And I asked her in September or August, I said, before I brought Jenny back out to her mom, I said, where do you expect this relationship to go? And she said, I expect to be married by the end of the year. And this is in July or late July, early August. And I said, to whom? She goes, to you. And so I came out, and at our high school, we sat on the lunch wall, and I said, what about this idea of marriage? And she goes, yes. And I'm just as posing question. So we got married. I quit a rather lucrative job in California, moved back to Colorado, and worked for the local newspaper doing what I do, which is writing and photography.
How did you start Christian Resort Ministries?
That's an interesting story. When I was in 7th grade, I think it was, or 6th grade, I came home and I walked into my room, Podestas Park, and there's this girl sitting in my room. Now, that's my boy cave. And why is this little girl sitting in my room crying? So I walked back out and talked to my mom and said, what is going on? And she said, her dad was killed on the boulder field because of lightning. Your dad is working with her mom to get the people home. Your job is to help her. And I'm thinking, I'm 11 or 12 years old. What? Like, I've got a Dr. Phil degree. And so I just sat with her. She was sitting in my chair, and I just sat on the floor and held her hand. That's all I could do. That's what I asked God. I said, what do you want to, what do I do? He said, just shut up and hold her hand. I said, all right, fine. And so at that point in my life, I couldn't answer the question, how do you go home with the same amount of luggage, but not the same amount of family? And I have a good friend of mine that was a ranger, and he said he's convinced that there's a bucket at the opening of every national park that said brains, and that's where people leave them when they go into the park. And so years later, I was with another couple of friends of ours, Barbara and I were, and we started talking about how do you address what happens when you're RVing and tragedy strikes. And then let's go further than that. How do people in an RV park, they'll go to church, but they want to go to church in flip-flop shorts and a t-shirt. And that's just not going to set with some denominations, but in an RV park it will. Jesus did not write an email to the lepers and say, meet me at Starbucks to discuss your medical condition. He went there. We thought, that's the mandate. We need to go there. Create Bible studies, church services, counseling for people. Some people are widows and widowers, and they find each other. And let's celebrate that new marriage with them. And let's just bring Christianity to the park. And that ministry started in 2002 and is still going strong.
But you're not involved with it anymore?
I'm on the board emeritus. And so they can take or leave my advice, and that's about it. And I just watch them do their thing,
Mm-hmm. What's next for you going forward?
Whatever God wants me to do. I have no idea. My prayer is, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? And then when he says that, it's, are you kidding me? So I hope that the book Long Road Home touches the lives of people and sees that there is hope, that things are out there, that there's an opportunity to save your child or to save yourself. A pastor friend of mine asked me at a men's conference just a while back, he got this kind of sly look at me, and he says, all right, I've written this book. He says, what do you want to do with it? And I said, if it saves one person and brings one person to Christ, and that can be the same person, then it's done its job. If it does two, then it's done twice its job. He said, you don't want it to be a bestseller? I said, that's not my call. That's God's call. He said, wow. He said, I didn't expect that answer. I said, expect the unexpected when you talk to me.
Mm-hmm. Good point. If you had to start your life over again, is there anything you'd do differently?
Oh, that list would go on for thousands and thousands.
Okay.
Yeah, I would love to rewind my VCR with the knowledge I have now. So I cannot do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can do is go forward with the knowledge I have and say, you see, Greg, the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield. We need to look out the windshield and look back through the rearview mirror only occasionally, because the past is past. So your question is exactly good and wonderful to answer, but what is in the past is in the past. Have I forgiven myself for atrocities and things that I've done and had to work hard as a single parent for Jenny and maybe left her a little bit more latchkey than I should have? Yes, I've forgiven myself, and yes, I did. But that means I'm still going to go forward and do what I can and be involved at whatever level I need to be involved, that God said, you need to be involved at a level of 10. Now it's a level of 7. Right now, Bob, we're going to bench you because other players need to be in. And that's his call, not mine.
That's a great way to look at that. I had never considered that. Benching you so other players can get in the game for a while.
Exactly. I'm not the best player in the world, but maybe I am for this one play.
What advice would you give to people over 50 who are either struggling to identify their purpose or wonder how to pursue it?
Prayer. Petition by prayer. The silence, the deafening silence of listening to God, hearing his thundering velvet voice is what you need to start with. And then when he says to you, travel down this path and go through this door, understand that generally, and this is said in the book, Jenny says it so well, that I've traveled through some doors, looked back, and they had no handle on the other side, the side that I'm on. God will put you through that door, and there will be no handle. That's the positive part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Understand, you could go back, but just go forward. In Isaiah, there's a verse that talks about flying on the wings of eagles, and it says that you run, you walk, and it's backwards. But God only asks you to take one step at a time. He doesn't ask you to run. He says, just take one step and I'll let you know when the next one's supposed to be there. So for people over 50, okay, we're over 50. Maybe we just shuffle one step at a time. But at the same time, just take that one step. If all of a sudden you go by a nonprofit business and you hear this voice inside you saying, volunteer there, turn that car around, walk in there and say, I think I'm supposed to be here. And you will hear the director of that nonprofit organization say, we need your skill.
Mm-hmm.
People over 50 have a labyrinth of skills that they aren't using.
Absolutely.
Use them. Teach English as a second language to the legal immigrants that come here. Go to a food bank and say, look, I am really good at coordinating things. Let me help you streamline this operation. Get involved in something.
There is something for you to do that will utilize your natural talents, your learned skills, and your unique life experiences. I'm fully convinced of that.
Yeah, we are not designed to just sit around and go to a prescribed happy hour. We are designed to have 24 hours of happy hour, and that's volunteering. A lot of retired people I talk to say, I can't believe how busy I am. I thought I wouldn't be. I said, I'm busier now than when I worked. Exactly.
That's right.
That's where you should be.
And you've also shown people over 50 that it's important to tell your stories, even the painful ones, because they can provide hope to other people who are enduring the same situation.
We've been down that road. We know where the exits are and we know where the exits aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Other younger people and even some older people don't know. It gets back to get involved, be there, listen to what God wants you to do, and you just go do it. There's a movie out called Finding Forrester with Sean Connery, and he's talking to this young writing protege, and they're sitting across from each other. And they're supposed to be writing, and the young protege is just sitting there. And Sean Connery Forrester said, darn it, just write. Volunteer, darn it, just volunteer. Find something. If it's not right for you, move on. Find something else.
That's right. I've heard a number of people say that. If you don't know what to do for your purpose, then just start volunteering. And that will trigger it will open your eyes to the needs in the community that are really in your heart, so that you can put yourself to use helping to fulfill those.
Yeah, it's the best per hour salary you could possibly have, is because you're investing in another person. And when you pay it forward, they too then will learn to pay it forward.
How can people connect with you if they'd like to chat with you?
I have a website. It's robertnruesch.com. That's my Gmail is robertnruesch@gmail. Those are the best ways. I have a Facebook page by the same name. They can ask to join on that. I'm starting a page called Thinking Out Loud, which will be my author page. And if I would just get to it, I could probably populate that better, but I'm somewhat 78 years old and lazy, so sometimes I don't do that. But those are the best ways to get in contact with me.
Okay. And your book is available on Amazon?
It's on Amazon as a Kindle book and also as hard copy. You can also get it from Ingram Spark. If you go to my Facebook page, there's a QR code there, or write me and I will send you the QR code. You can buy it directly through the printer. And by February, we expect to have it out on Audible.
On Audible? Will
Yes.
you be recording it yourself?
My audio producer is saying I have to do it myself, but we're wrestling with me doing it, but I think I will.
Super.
I trust him. He's done my first 2 books and I just followed his guidance.
And who's your publisher?
Publisher is Lumify Media. It's a Christian publishing company out of Centennial, Colorado. The thing I like about Lumify is the fact that if you want to talk to the president, you can talk to the president. His calendar's up and he will set a video call for you and he will be there. The rest of their staff is exactly the same way. They support you. And matter of fact, he is the one that came up with the title and the design of the cover, which I believe is an award-winning cover. And the people that have seen it, they said, oh my gosh, that tells the story.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing your story with me today, Robert. I appreciate it. And I wish you the best of luck going forward.
Thank you. And let us know how we can pray for you and all your listeners.
Robert Ruesch's story of helping his daughter overcome addiction is heartbreaking, but it also conveys hope to thousands of families struggling with the same problem. We never really know what's going on behind closed doors, which is why we should always be mindful to give people grace. As a father myself, I cannot imagine living with the pain and uncertainty of not knowing where a child is or even if he or she is alive. What a horrible feeling to be helplessly waiting, hoping for the best, but being prepared for a knock on the door from a police officer. Jennifer's story shows that even Christians are not perfect and must contend with real-world problems. That's why I like Robert's book, The Long Road Home, for explaining what keeps addicts addicted and why parents should never give up hope. Required a dose of tough love from time to time, and Robert had faith in God that he would protect Jennifer and bring her through the ordeal. One of my favorite aspects of the book is that it begins with scripture verse and ends with a meaningful quote. That sandwiches Robert's and Jennifer's story between truth and hope. One aspect of Robert's story that I just loved was the fact that following 2 unsuccessful marriages, he married his high school sweetheart who he had not seen for 25 years, and they are happily married today. Robert admits there are thousands of things he would do differently with his life if given the opportunity. However, he noted the rearview mirror is much smaller than the windshield. It's a reminder that we need to keep looking forward instead of backward. For people who may not sense a purpose for their lives after turning 50, Robert encourages them to volunteer their time for a cause. He called it the best return for time invested for any job on the market for its ability to empower the volunteers and changing the lives of people being helped. People can connect with Robert through his website at www.robertruesch.com. He's also active on Facebook at facebook.com/robert.ruesch. His book, The Long Road Home, A Family's Journey Through Addiction, is available on Amazon and in other bookstores. That's all I have for this week's show. If you'd like help in identifying a purpose for your life or to get help planning your next steps, I'm offering a complimentary brainstorming session to members of the Forward from 50 Facebook community. For details, connect with me on Facebook or visit www.forwardfrom50.com. I'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thanks for listening, and if you like the show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.